Today, we are talking about women. Let's go, everyone. Let's give it up for women. Yeah, women. Woohoo! We've talked about women a total of twice on this channel. Well, we've talked about them more than that, but a dedicated video. There are too many men. Get rid of them. No more men. Throw them out, leave them on the curb, and put a big "Please Adopt Me" sign on their box, because today's focus is women. Beautiful women. Powerful women. One woman. The only woman who was part of the warlords. Come here, Oda. I just want to talk. Anyways, this lovely lady has kicked kittens, puppies, and baby seals. She's even thrown old women out of buildings with the very same might as Emperor Cusco.
You threw off my groove!
These things are dastardly, wicked, even cruel, but she gets away with it. Why? Well, because she's beautiful, of course. Not an emperor, but an empress. Get it? Because the whole thing is snakes? Sorry. A character whose power most certainly matches her beauty, and one of my personal favorite characters One Piece has punched me from behind with. The ever gorgeous, ever proud queen of Amazon Lily, Boa Hancock. In my opinion, and possibly a controversial one, Boa is one of the funniest characters One Piece has. I know there's a lot to contend with, considering there's knee slappers such as Bartolomeo, Cavendish, Buggy, Brook, Usopp, Luffy, Law. Yes, Law. He's funny to me, okay? You wouldn't get it. But Boa's introduction was so absurd. To begin with, everything about her character was so absurd. Her first appearance was her literally kicking a kitten. I know tons of people think this is just asshole behavior, and by all means it is, but I could not help laughing at whatever the hell was going on here. This is all crazy. She is crazy. And in all honesty, I love seeing awful, horrible women. I'm all for a fictional lady who is just wacky and cruel and unforgiving on screen. And One Piece has indeed supplied this many times. However, Boa is a standout for multiple reasons. Because, in true One Piece fashion, she runs much deeper than she lets on. And I am so excited to finally talk about her. But before I do that, it's sponsor time. While we cannot all be pirates in our current day and age, we can still be pirates online, and we can do that safely with Atlas VPN. If you're not a tech nerd like me and have no idea what a VPN is, a VPN makes it so all your internet searches, browsing, and history is completely protected. It's sure to hide your IP address, and it keeps you safe from spying, especially from the pesky FBI agent in your computer who's watching you look up Zoro's big fat boobies as we speak. But Atlas VPN isn't just a VPN, it also protects you from pop-up ads and malicious malware. It can also give you access to any country's version of Netflix or Disney Plus. I mentioned Disney Plus specifically because did you guys know that the entirety of Bleach is on Australian Disney Plus? And with Atlas, yes, you can take advantage of Atlas's summer deal discount. You can get a 3-year subscription from $1.83 a month with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Even better than that, if you use my link in the description below, you get an 85% discount for premium subscription. Snatch that deal while it's hot, and thank you so much Atlas VPN for sponsoring this video. I won't let you down. Back to the drop-dead gorgeous queen. Boa, from what I can tell, seems to be a bit of a controversial character, or at least the audience consensus of her is very mixed. It depends where you look. If you're in the Boa love sphere, of course you won't see any of that, and God, do I wish I were there. I knew of her before meeting her. I didn't really know what to make of her because I knew nothing else but her appearance, ironically enough. I just saw outside audience consensus on the liking and hating of her character. But like One Piece tends to do, and like many characters in this series, Boa became a very quick favorite of mine, along with a character who I found to be a delight on screen. I know Stampede isn't canon, but having her contend with all these other Devil Fruit users who could float by simply running at high aggressive speeds was so goddamn funny I popped a lung at it. This girl is goofy, she's weird, and I think the common misconception is that she's stone cold, when it's not that she's actually stone cold, this is the act she puts on. What I'm saying is, if you think Boa is stone cold, congratulations, you've fallen for her act, because her tough exterior is kind of a main point and aspect of her character. In saying that, even her toughness is goofy, considering she's the woman who looks so far down on you, she looks up. How is this not just silly? I cannot deny the majority of Boa's introduction scenes for her character and person just made me laugh. She's ridiculous. Everything about her is ridiculous. She's dramatic, she's excessive, she's weird. But most importantly, when we first meet her, all her actions scream that she's overcompensating for something. For what, you ask? We will surely be getting to that. I don't want to reveal all my Hancock cards just yet. But the themes Boa has, the allegories and interpretations that can be taken from what her and her sisters went through are, I'll say, intense. To be frank, Boa's story really shocked me, jaw-droppingly so, from the meanings and obtaining of her powers to the Medusa metaphor she shares. And that metaphor is one of the reasons I like Boa so much, because I've seen pretty limited media that feels sympathetic to the character of Medusa. I know there's a lot out there. I know there's plenty that probably are sympathetic to the legend of Medusa, but the majority depict her as a monster, because that's what she's meant to be. Medusa is meant to be a woman with hundreds of snakes crawling on her head, who turns anyone and anything to stone if they look at her, so who wouldn't make her a monster? But if you go into the actual legend, which can change depending on the version you read, what you discover is that Medusa is actually the victim of her story. I can't get into it because Mr. YouTube would hunt me down and take me away, but the general idea is she was preyed upon due to her beauty, and while becoming Medusa was a curse, it was also a power she used to protect herself. Yet, in many modern iterations we see of Medusa today, she's made out to be this wicked, evil being who's mostly the villain to be defeated, following the legend of Perseus cutting her head off. And if we look at Boa, well, this legend follows her own character beat for beat, but the reason I find Boa so spectacular in her writing, and the reason she doesn't feel like a very overused, very worn down metaphor of Medusa, is because her character is one to sympathize with in an awfully tragic way. And that's exactly what I want to dissect. I want to look at why her character is so upsetting, and is so fantastically done with how I feel so much compassion for her. Hopefully by the end of this you feel that too, but you know, it's your life. Go slay girl boss, I'm not gonna hold you back. Yes, you, even the man sitting there, you're a girl boss now. So from the very beginning, what do we get from Boa? Her first scene, and an honestly infamous one, is when she kicks a kitten. Again, to me, this was so damn goofy, but it's obviously a very cruel action. So right out the gate, we are getting a sense of this woman's compassion or lack thereof, especially with how she excuses it. She gets away with everything because she's beautiful. It feels overly privileged, petty, and bratty. At first glance, she reads as a character who gets everything she wants, literally even telling us she gets everything she wants. Boa is a diva, and we're not meant to take her as anything else at this point, coming across as fundamentally unlikable, unless you're like me who found this all to be ridiculous. And yes, I know I keep using that word, but it's because she's just so ridiculous. Also, you'd be surprised at just how many people found her kicking kittens and puppies and baby seals to just be the last straw, which is extremely funny to me considering what plenty of other characters in this series do that's even worse, but I digress. From the start of Amazon Lily and with Luffy's solo adventure, Boa very much starts off as our antagonist. She's a warlord, and from what we've seen of warlords, they don't seem to be all that good. So who she was going to be and her overall morals were always going to be called into question considering the reputations the warlords have. But even this title she has, and the power it grants her, is a part of unraveling her character, which again, we'll get into, so get comfy. Our first look at Boa has her being the greedy, privileged empress we're made to believe she is. But as she petrifies the Marines in order to stop them, she says something about their desires I find particularly interesting.
さすがは海軍本部中将。なるほど。痛みで邪心をもみ消したか。経験値の差じゃな。
She calls the Marines' desires and thoughts about her evil. She calls their attraction to her evil. This immediately stood out to me because I don't believe attraction to a person to be anything evil. And I don't think One Piece overall has this message either. One can have dirty thoughts, of course, but evil is just such a harsh word for something that's pretty natural for some people. Yes, this could very well be overanalyzing, but it stuck out like a sore thumb to me. And it's this kind of dialogue that immediately had me hone in on Boa with the idea that there's definitely more beneath the surface. She, like many lovely ladies do, caught my interest. And it just kept getting deeper and deeper from here. Once she arrives back at Amazon Lily, we discover Boa and her sisters all have a mark on their back from defeating a dreaded Medusa-esque monster that no one is allowed to look at due to the curse it brings. But then Luffy drops down into the bath Boa's in, sees Boa's back, and nothing happens. And when she uses her power on him, nothing happens. As much of a gag as this is, Luffy simply being Luffy here holds a lot of significance for why Boa sees him the way she does. And the thing I really like about this whole interaction, and the thing I like in general with the building of Boa's character, is she doesn't like Luffy immediately at all. In fact, she straight up hates him, due to him both being a man and someone she can't quite understand. Some sins can never be forgiven. These few seconds in the bath were all Luffy needed to read Boa's insecurities, and it comes back around in a fantastic way with the execution scene, because as Luffy sees more of Boa, he's witnessing her effects while being the only one not to fall for it. Luffy watches as Boa punishes Amazon Lily citizens for helping Luffy, watches as she threatens to break their petrified selves, and he screams at the audience who continues to cheer Boa on, questioning why they're letting her do anything she wants with no consequence or hatred. The bit comes back as Boa explains it's because she's beautiful, and Luffy says something to her she's probably never heard in her life until this very moment.
そなたもそうであろう。お前ムカつくな。
At this point, Boa has met someone who is looking past her beauty and sees the wicked things she's doing for what they are, which understandably unnerves her. Something that's incredibly interesting considering she said previously that she likes honest people, and Luffy is the most honest person one could ever meet. But again, we'll get back around to that. The fight Luffy has with Boa's sisters finally hits a climax as one of their shirts burns off, revealing what is supposedly the monster's mark. And we see Luffy's amazing reading of character and person come in full throttle when using himself to hide this mysterious mark. At this point, we know Luffy knows this mark won't actually harm anyone around them, yet he still goes out of his way to cover it, showing even more of his emotional intelligence as he explains their fight and what the sisters don't want exposed are two completely different things. Luffy may not like Boa and her sisters at this point, but he's not a cruel person. He refuses to allow what he's recognized as something traumatic for them to be shown to their citizens, because Luffy is just very good at seeing what pain turns people into. He's seen it and fixed it multiple times after all. But it's what one of the sisters says that cuts particularly deep for me. Mari! 今のうちにこの男! 何をしているの? Mari!
無理よ、ソニア姉様。私たちは今、その男に守られてるから。
I know I keep saying this, but we'll get back to that. Even Boa, as unbreakable as she appears to be, is shaken by this display. Whatever mark this is on their backs, having her demanding the fight to be over. And as she stands there, watching Luffy protect her and her sisters, she's hit with traumatic thoughts that she forcibly tries to shake off. And this scene here, with Boa nervously sweating on the brink of a possible panic attack, is the first time we've witnessed her express genuine emotion and fear. It's only a glimpse before she snaps back to her cold self, but it's enough for us to recognize something important. Boa has a mask, one made of ice and stone, and for a split second there, we watched it crack. It seems she can't really understand Luffy's reasoning at all. Seems she doesn't actually believe in Luffy's honest nature and golden heart, because Boa continues to poke at it even after this event. She does so in the form of a choice, telling Luffy she will only grant him one wish out of two, these choices being to fix the petrified girls or grant him a boat to find his crew. Boa states this is to find his true nature, to see if he was really doing everything he did to get something out of her for himself. And it makes sense to think this way. Why else would a random guy you just met, who claims you piss him off, reach out with a kindness without ulterior motives? But with Luffy being Luffy, he doesn't even take a second to think about it, and instead bows to thank her for releasing the Amazon girls of their petrified states, which for good reason shocks Boa entirely, because she's discovering Luffy is as honest as he lets on. And he has no ulterior motive to truly be kind to her by putting those Boa petrified above his own needs. And once we go back to Boa's temple, and once Luffy is invited to discover what Boa's mark really is, we finally get into the origins of the mark upon her back. These coming scenes and lines so deeply tragic, it upturned everything I'd originally thought and seen of Boa since her introduction. The mark on her back is actually that of a slave mark, Boa and her sisters being branded like cattle for the celestial dragons. And we find Boa is so ashamed of it, she refuses to allow anyone to see it. What we see is Boa is a victim, through and through. Boa is so choked up in trying to explain her story she can hardly get the words out. And Luffy, seeing the distress this is causing to the three sisters, tells her she doesn't need to explain anything to him. And I cannot state how much of a warm hug this sentiment is, because even though Boa put Luffy through some extremely trying acts, Luffy is telling her she doesn't need to explain her actions or her story to him. Especially considering these memories alone, this clearly traumatic time of Boa's life is so agonizing that one of the sisters screams in pain from remembering what they've gone through. Luffy is essentially letting Boa know she doesn't have to relive this pain for him, but Boa feels he's earned the right to know, and Boa's facade finally breaks in front of us with this story she tells. When she was a child, she was kidnapped along with her sisters from one of the Amazon Lily ships, and the reason Boa believes she was kidnapped is honestly heartbreaking. She thinks this happened because she let her guard down, that the auction, the marking, and the torture was all because she let her guard down, even though she was a child. Boa hates the celestial dragons, of course, but she ultimately puts the blame on herself for not being attentive enough to avoid the kidnapping, which, when you're a victim of this circumstance, yeah, that is a harrowing look at how this can be a mirror of reality with someone like Boa, because, let me state it again, Boa was a child. Boa blaming herself and her sense of awareness for being kidnapped would be like if Wala blamed herself for her own kidnapping and enslavement. There is no one else to blame but the celestial dragons and the slave traders for such a horrendous act. But Boa can't help but beat herself up for what she and her sisters had gone through. She cannot help but blame herself for the marks seared upon her back. It only gets worse as we discover Boa's power. Her devil fruit came from her forcibly being made to eat it for the celestial dragon's entertainment. And the horror of Boa's story here, what makes my and your skin crawl, is the things that were not said. The implications of what Boa's gone through is extremely heavy, and I can't really explain what the allegory of Boa being forced to eat the devil fruit for entertainment could be, but I'm sure you get the picture. Like, I truly cannot reiterate how heavy this whole thing is, but One Piece is fantastic at blending fantasy with reality, so the choice is yours on whether this is something to be taken at face value or not. That's one of the things I really love about this series. Boa breaks down by the end of her story, suffering from a very clear and extreme case of PTSD, and what she says breaks my heart.
俺たちは一切の隙も見せぬ。もう誰からも支配されとうない。
We won't let anyone take advantage of us again. Once more, this is Boa putting the blame on herself, and she's coping with it by being who she is in the present day. So, with everything we know, let's have a look at her introduction with fresh eyes. Kicking kittens from her path, saying she can get away with anything due to her beauty, being cold towards all that oppose her and especially love her. We now know exactly where this has come from. She absolutely refuses to let her guard down, concluding that what she went through was due to this. She must show she is cold and hard on the surface, that things such as cute kittens or kind actions will not ever sway her, and she must never be vulnerable again. Through and through, Boa is wearing nothing but a mask, and her true self has been buried beneath it ever since being engraved with the mark of a slave. In reality, everything Boa's doing is to protect herself and her people, even if she must be seen as cruel because of it. Yes, it can be seen as overkill, but can you really blame her when the pain she went through is unspeakable? Luffy is an outsider of Amazon Lily, a man she has no trust nor faith in, so she petrifies those who help and stand up for him at the time, because if she lets one man in, if she lets one guy go, this can lead to multiple others sneaking past and being offered help by her people. And all Boa sees in this situation is her people and herself being taken advantage of. Boa is cruel in her ways to prevent further pain, and she masks it as something selfish due to empathy towards others being a possible vulnerability, which we see so clearly with her warlord title. Boa explaining to the Marines the reason she wants to keep her warlord title is because she just likes it, when the reality is she actually wants the warlord title because it protects her island and her people. She wants it for purely selfless means, but she masks it as something selfish. Boa, just like the story of Medusa, had become a monster, but we are pretty outright shown it's due to her being the victim of this story. And there's even more in Boa's actions here, because what I can see with Boa is her desperately trying to take her power back. Boa's power, probably in her mind, is very much not hers. It's possible Boa does not feel her body even belongs to her, because the psychological damage this mark and the force feeding of a devil fruit has put her through would be unimaginable. Boa's beauty, Her body is something she can use to have power over people, but her beauty is also something that objectifies her to the eyes of both women and men. Her beauty is also something that would have had her kidnapped, that turned her into a slave, and suddenly she's twisted from this bratty diva into a victim desperately trying to regain her power back. Boa has weaponized her beauty to benefit herself, because if she's only going to be seen for it, she may as well turn it into something that can protect her. She can get away with anything because she's beautiful, but it's possible she resents it for how the world views her due to it. What I'm saying here is there's a reason we're given the prominence of Boa's beauty always being put first. Boa, by those who adore and fawn over her, is not seen as a person. Everyone around her is extremely shallow in their love for her, looking past her cruel actions to only love her for her beauty. So what else to do but weaponize it? Which is why Luffy is so important in her story. Luffy, in all his honesty and in all his Luffiness, saw Boa's actions first. He sees her for the person she is, both with the mask on and off, and Boa doesn't know how to navigate this. There is no shallowness with how Luffy views Boa, not from the very beginning, and it was an act of honesty Boa desperately needed to heal. Even as she breaks down in front of Luffy while telling her story, the former Empress of Amazon Lily laughs that she thought Boa had turned to ice, and this is the first time Boa has shown emotion in a long time. And after she tells Luffy her story, she says one more line that just stabs me through the heart and honest to God makes me cry.
そなたは奴隷であったわらわを蔑むかは
Once more, Boa is blaming herself for her torture, because this question is so heartbreaking that I really cannot help but feel nothing but empathy for her. Boa doesn't come out to anyone with her story because she thinks they'll see her as lesser. She thinks she'll be seen as weak and vulnerable, and Boa's so terrified of this thought she's desperate to claim her own power of her life and self back. This is probably why she has Conqueror's Haki, the will to conquer being released from Boa with the pure rage and grief in wanting control. Boa is extreme in her devotion to Luffy because feelings of kindness in letting her walls down and being vulnerable towards someone is not something she's experienced before. It's not something she's done since being a child. So with Luffy being someone who's punched the celestial dragons, her abusers, and taking her for who she is, not at all seeing her as weaker for bearing the mark of a slave, Boa cannot control this infatuation. And yes, it's weird, but it makes total sense for her character. She has no idea how to navigate anything like this, so being over the top and dramatic is pretty on course for how she's bottled everything up ever since being a kid. We do see she has exceptions for others sometimes, considering how she treats Rayleigh. But Rayleigh is in a very special category of not only helping with her escape from the Holy Lands, but Rayleigh is also with a former Amazon Lily Empress. Which, you know, get it, Grandpa, cause god damn. I think to conclude this, my opinion of Boa is just, she's so incredibly tragic, but she's so strong. She has one of the heaviest stories and allegories of the entire series, and her being a victim is a huge part of her character, but it's not who she is. She, like many other instances in this series, shows the emotional intelligence and empathy One Piece has in its writing. After all, the perception of a victim is usually played to be soft and quiet. And while this can be the case, Boa is a very real instance of what being a victim turns a person into for their own protection and the guilt they suffer. Boa's writing is incredibly mature, and she's a character I use to convince people to watch One Piece, because I do truly think she's one of the best ones out there. And while I do, like many, love Boa for her beauty, I also love her for the ridiculous, crazy things she does, because I support girl wrongs too. And with that, thanks for watching. I think this was a very heavy video. The topic of Boa is honestly hard to tackle without really getting into the nitty-gritty of it, and I tried to stay as vague as I could, but I do really hope this connects with a lot of people. As always, let me know your thoughts. I'm a Boa lover myself, and I understand why people dislike her, but tell me your opinions of the Snake Empress so I can read them and write them down and then maybe cry myself to sleep. Just a quick reminder that I do have a Patreon, and if you'd like to support me there, I'd really appreciate it. However, I know not everyone can support me in that way, and just watching and sharing these videos does more than you can imagine for me. If there's anything you'd like to see me cover, One Piece or otherwise, please let me know. And I'll see you in whatever I make next. See ya!